Okay, get ready because this deep dive takes us into the Tang Dynasty,
Yeah.
a time known for its culture,
Yeah.
vibrant culture, and some pretty intense power struggles.
So real drama.
Yeah, and you've given us some fascinating accounts and analysis on Yang Guifei, one of the legendary four great beauties of China.
Mm-hmm.
And, her story is far from a fairy tale.
Right. It really begs the question, was she like a cunning manipulator who climbed the ranks of power? Or was she more of a pawn, a tragic figure caught in the crossfire of imperial ambition? So, to understand her story, we have to set the stage right. We're in the Tang Dynasty. Emperor Xuanzong's on the throne, and his beloved consort, Lady Wu, she's really determined to secure her son's future as the next emperor.
Okay, so that sounds like we are already in for some serious palace intrigue.
Oh, yeah.
What did Lady Wu do to try and make her son the crown prince?
She went to extraordinary lengths. I mean, some might even say ruthless lengths.
Wow.
To get rid of any rivals, she basically framed the current crown prince, Li Ying, and his two brothers for treason, leading to their execution.
Oh, wow. Talk about a power move.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what it must have been like in that court, knowing someone was capable of something like that.
It must have been intense.
Yeah.
So anyway, she succeeded in getting rid of her son's rivals, but, the weight of her actions, it caught up with her. She was consumed by guilt, and she had these terrible nightmares, and she ended up falling ill and dying, leaving the emperor completely heartbroken.
So the emperor's left grieving and vulnerable and
Wow.
without a clear successor. I can see how this kind of creates the perfect opportunity for someone like Yang Guifei to kind of enter the picture.
Exactly. So Yang Guifei was already kind of connected to the imperial family because she was married to one of the emperor's sons, Prince Shao.
Oh, wait, hold on a second. She was married to the emperor's son.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty big obstacle, even in a dynasty known for its flexibility, shall we say.
Right, exactly. It definitely raised some eyebrows. We're
Yeah.
talking about a society where, social hierarchy, Confucian values, these things were really important. Marrying your father-in-law, even if he is the emperor, would be a huge scandal.
So how do they manage to get around this?
Yeah.
I mean, they couldn't just ignore the fact that she was already married into the family.
Right, so they went to great lengths to smooth things over, and it's believed that Yang Guifei was sent to a convent for some time to create this separation from her husband.
Ah, okay.
So essentially, this maneuver was a way to appease any critics and maintain some kind of propriety within the court.
Yeah, like a classic case of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting how they were able to reintroduce her as someone suitable for the emperor.
Right.
Makes you think about all the power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
Who were some of the people that were orchestrating this plan?
Well, one figure who likely played a crucial role was the eunuch Gao Lychee.
Okay.
He was very powerful in the court, and he was a trusted advisor to the emperor. It's possible that he saw an opportunity to strengthen his family's position. So he aligned himself with Yang Guifei and recommended her to the grieving emperor.
So it's not just about beauty here. It's also about connections and alliances.
Exactly.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what a eunuch is and why this Gao Lychee would have had so much influence?
Sure. So a eunuch is a man who has been castrated, and they often served in roles that required them to be close to the emperor and his family.
Oh, wow.
And in the Tang Dynasty, eunuchs, they actually had a lot of power. They often acted as advisors, administrators, and even military commanders. And they were seen as trustworthy because they couldn't have children, so they were seen as less of a threat to the imperial line.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so in this context, Gao Lychee's support would have been essential for Yang Guifei's rise to power.
It sounds like she was really smart and knew how to play the game.
Definitely. And I mean, we are talking about Yang Guifei, one of the four great beauties of China, so her beauty definitely played a part. But beauty alone wouldn't have been enough. So it raises the question of how much of her success can be attributed to her own ambition versus the influence of the people around her, like Gao Lychee and maybe even her family members.
It's kind of like a nature versus nurture debate, but set in the Tang Dynasty court.
Exactly.
This is where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah, and as we go deeper into her story, we'll learn about her life as the emperor's favorite, the amazing lifestyle she had, and those famous lychees that are synonymous with her story.
Okay, I'm definitely all ears about those lychees.
Okay, we'll get to that.
But first, I want to know more about the four great beauties.
Sure.
Were they all powerful like Yang Guifei?
Mm-hmm.
And how did they get this legendary status?
That's a great question. The four great beauties, they're fascinating figures in Chinese history and folklore. And, the beauty was legendary, but their lives and legacies are really diverse. What they all share is this connection to really important moments in Chinese history, and they've had a lasting impact on art and literature. Each of their stories gives us a glimpse into the idea of beauty, power, and fate in ancient China.
It sounds like beauty could be both a blessing and a curse.
It often was.
Can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
We've been talking about Yang Guifei's, rise to power and how she kind of managed to navigate those really complex dynamics of the Tang Dynasty court. But I'm curious about how her relationship with the emperor affected the dynasty itself.
Oh, yeah.
Did their love story have any political consequences?
Well, you can't really separate their relationship from the politics of the time.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about an empire where the emperor's choices had really big consequences.
Yeah.
And a lot of historians point to a change in the emperor's focus after he fell for Yang Guifei.
Okay.
He started to delegate more and more responsibilities to certain officials. And some people argue that this actually led to a decline in, the effectiveness of the dynasty's administration.
So are we saying that the emperor was basically distracted by love and neglected his duties as a ruler?
Well, I think some historians would argue that's a bit of an oversimplification.
Okay.
While the emperor's love for Yang Guifei was, undeniable, he was also facing internal power struggles and external threats to the empire.
Right.
Historical events are rarely caused by just one thing.
That's true.
It's always complex.
Yeah, I guess we need to think about the bigger picture of the Tang Dynasty during this time.
Yeah.
What were some of the other challenges that the emperor was dealing with besides, his relationship with Yang Guifei?
Well, I mean, the Tang Dynasty was huge
Yeah.
with this complicated web of political alliances and, rivalries.
Yeah.
The emperor had to deal with officials who were, ambitious and wanted power. There were military threats along the borders and economic ups and downs. It was a constant balancing act to try and keep everything stable and prosperous.
I can see how someone as influential as Yang Guifei could become kind of a focal point for all of those tensions.
Exactly.
Especially if her family members started to gain influence.
Right. So, for example, Yang Guifei's cousin, Yang Guizong,
Okay.
he became a really powerful minister.
Hmm.
And some historians argue that he used his connection to Yang Guifei to, enrich himself and his family,
Oh.
while others say he was a good administrator and that he was kind of unfairly blamed for the dynasty's problems.
It sounds like there are conflicting accounts here. And as we said before, it's important to look at things from different perspectives.
Exactly.
But I want to know more about how Yang Guifei is portrayed in these different accounts. Is she seen as like a schemer? Or is she more of a tragic figure?
Well, that's actually one of the most interesting things about Yang Guifei's story.
Okay.
Over the centuries, she's been shown in lots of different ways.
Okay.
It kind of reflects the changing social values and interpretations of history. Some people say she was a really ambitious woman who used her beauty and influence to help her family. Others say that she was a victim of circumstance, caught up in all this political intrigue, and,
Right.
and that she ultimately paid the price for the emperor's love.
It's like her story becomes this way to explore all these different themes. Love, power, betrayal,
Right.
fate.
Yeah, it's really remarkable how someone from so long ago can still resonate with us in these really complex ways.
Yeah, it is.
And I think that's what makes studying history so great. We're not just learning about events, we're learning about human stories,
Yeah.
human struggles,
Yeah.
and these questions about power and how it affects people and whole societies.
Speaking of the power of, power, we can't forget about those Lychees.
Right.
They've become kind of a symbol of Yang Guifei
Hmm.
and this lavish lifestyle that she had.
Exactly.
It's said that the emperor had these exotic fruits brought from far away just to make her happy.
Yeah, it's a famous story.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, the story of the Lychees really shows how extravagant the Tang Dynasty court was.
Yeah.
And it also tells us something about the emperor's devotion to Yang Guifei.
Okay.
The most common version of the story suggests that the Lychees were transported all the way from Lingnan,
Okay.
which is modern-day Guangdong and Guangxi provinces, and that was a really long and difficult journey, especially with the limited transportation they had back then.
Yeah, that's going the extra mile. Wow.
Right.
It's like a logistical feat.
Totally.
But you mentioned before that there are some different ideas about where those Lychees came from.
Right, right. So some historical accounts and even poems by Du Fu, the famous poet,
Yeah.
suggest that the Lychees could have come from the Shu region, which is modern-day Sichuan.
Oh, okay.
And that area was known for its fertile land and, lots of different agricultural products.
Mm.
So it's possible that they were growing a type of lychee there that the imperial court really liked.
So is it Lingnan or Sichuan?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if these different accounts are just different versions of the story,
Right.
or if there's a deeper reason why the origin of the lychees changes.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting question that makes us think critically about historical sources,
Yeah.
and how stories are passed down through time.
Right.
Maybe both accounts are true,
Okay.
and the lychees that the emperor and Yang Guifei ate came from both places.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be that the Lingnan story was emphasized because it was more dramatic.
Yeah.
It emphasizes how far the emperor would go to make his beloved happy.
Yeah, it's like a metaphor for history itself.
Right.
We often get different versions of the same story.
Exactly.
And it's up to us to kind of figure out what really happened, or at least find the most compelling narrative.
And sometimes those different narratives can all exist together,
Right.
each one giving us a unique perspective on the past and helping us understand the people and events that shaped our world.
That's a really great point.
So yeah, the lychee thing is interesting.
It is. Yang Guifei's story is much more than just a romantic tale.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a window into the politics, the society, even the food of the Tang Dynasty.
Yeah, definitely.
But we know that her story doesn't end with Lychees and palace life.
Right.
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 There's a darker chapter ahead, story of rebellion and
And
tragedy.
unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
The AnLushan rebellion was a huge uprising that almost brought down the Tang Dynasty.
Okay.
And it cast a shadow over Yang Guifei's life and eventually led to a very sad ending. But before we get into that, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier about the role of women in the Tang Dynasty.
Yeah.
Yang Guifei's story is exceptional, but how common was it for a woman to have that kind of influence back then?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been so focused on Yang Guifei's story
Right.
that it would be helpful to understand how her experience fits into the broader context of women's lives in the Tang Dynasty.
So the Tang Dynasty is often seen a pretty open and progressive time for women compared to other dynasties in China. Women from elite families had more freedom and opportunities for education.
Oh, wow.
There were even female poets and scholars,
Huh.
and even a female emperor, Wu Zixin.
Wow, a female emperor. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really challenges our assumptions about gender roles in ancient China.
So Yang Guifei's influence, while unusual, wasn't totally unprecedented.
Exactly. Her story is unique, but it's important to remember that she lived in a society where women could achieve positions of power and influence, even if those chances were only available to a few.
Right.
Her story reminds us that history is full of surprises, and that what we think we know about the past is always changing as we discover new evidence and perspectives.
This deep dive has definitely changed some of my ideas about the Tang Dynasty and the roles of women in that time.
I think that's a great takeaway.
It makes you realize how much we can learn from looking at history with an open mind
Absolutely.
and a willingness to question what we think we know.
Right. And speaking of challenging what we think we know, the AnLushan rebellion kind of throws everything we've talked about so far into chaos.
Okay, yeah.
It's a major turning point in Yang Guifei's story, and sadly, not a happy one.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me everything.
Okay, so the AnLushan rebellion was a devastating conflict.
Right.
It shook the Tang Dynasty to its core.
Wow.
It was led by a powerful general named AnLushan,
Okay.
who rebelled against the imperial court and caused, total chaos.
Oh, wow.
As the rebels got closer to the capital, the emperor and his entourage, including Yang Guifei, they had to flee.
Right.
They went to Mawaipo, a remote spot in Sichuan province, hoping to regroup and regain control.
So they're on the run, desperate to escape these rebels.
Exactly. It must have been a terrifying journey.
Yeah, filled with uncertainty.
Absolutely, but unfortunately, things got even worse at Mawaipo.
Oh, no.
The Imperial Guards, they blamed Yang Guifei and her family for all the problems the dynasty was facing. They saw her as this symbol of the emperor's distraction, and they thought that getting rid of her would appease the rebels and save the empire.
So she became a scapegoat
Yeah,
for
basically.
the rebellion's chaos.
Right, so the guards demanded that the emperor execute Yang Guifei and her cousin Yang Guisang
Oh, no.
as proof that he was serious about ending the rebellion.
Wow.
And the emperor, heartbroken and desperate to save himself and maybe even the dynasty, agreed to their demands.
This is so sad.
It really is.
She was sacrificed to appease a rebellious army
It's a tragic end.
for something that wasn't even her fault.
It's a moment in history that continues to fascinate and, kind of haunt us.
Yeah.
The emperor's decision, while understandable given the situation, shows just how brutal power can be.
Right.
And how even the most powerful people can become victims of things they can't control.
Yang Guifei's story is like a roller coaster of emotions.
It really is.
We've seen her rise to power,
Mm-hmm.
experience this incredible life at court, and then ultimately witness her tragic downfall.
It's a reminder that history is full of complexity.
Yeah.
And that even those who seem to have it all can be swept away by fate.
Her story also makes you think about how we understand history
Right.
and how individual lives can become intertwined with these major political events.
Exactly.
Was Yang Guifei a manipulative mastermind or a victim of circumstance? Or, something in between?
That's the question.
Yeah.
Maybe the answer is somewhere in that gray area where ambition, love, and just plain bad luck all come together.
It's like a tapestry.
Yeah, as intricate and fascinating as the Tang Dynasty itself.
That's a perfect way to put it.
I think you're right.
I'm starting to see that Yang Guifei's story is much more than just a love story.
Oh, definitely.
It's a window into the Tang Dynasty.
Absolutely.
But before we get too philosophical, I have one more question about Yang Guifei's death.
Okay.
How is it portrayed in art and literature? Is it always seen as this tragic ending, or are there other interpretations?
That's a great question. The story of her death has inspired so many artists, poets, and playwrights.
Yeah.
Some of them focus on the sadness,
Mm-hmm.
emphasizing the emperor's grief and the loss of such a great beauty.
Yeah.
Others look at the political consequences,
Okay.
using her death as a symbol of the dynasty's decline.
Interesting.
And then some even romanticize it.
Really?
Yeah, they portray it as this ultimate testament to a love so strong that it even conquered death.
It's amazing how one event can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Right.
It really shows the power of storytelling
Yeah,
and how we use the past to understand the present.
exactly. And it reminds us that history isn't fixed.
Right.
It's constantly changing and being reinterpreted as new generations come along.
Hmm.
Yang Guifei's story is a perfect example of that.
I agree.
And I think that's a great place to end our deep dive.
Yeah, this has been an incredible journey through the Tang Dynasty,
It has.
full of intrigue, romance, and tragedy.
All the good stuff.
I think our listener will come away with a new appreciation for Yang Guifei's story and how relevant it still is today.
I hope so.
Thanks for guiding us through this fascinating exploration.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep those curious minds engaged. And remember, history is more than just facts and dates.
It's a story waiting to be told.
Exactly. It's a story waiting to be uncovered, debated, and cherished. So we've really gone deep into Yang Guifei's life,
We have.
from her, rise to power
Yeah.
to that tragic end during the AnLushan rebellion.
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
It is.
It's a complex story.
It is, but I'm kind of left wondering what her story tells us about the Tang Dynasty and its place in history.
That's a great question, and it's one that historians are still debating.
Yeah.
On the one hand, her story reminds us of how opulent and artistic and just culturally vibrant the Tang Dynasty was.
Right.
It's often seen as a golden age in Chinese history.
Yeah, golden age.
The emperor's devotion to her, the lavish gifts like the Lychees brought from so far away,
Yeah, the life.
it all points to a time of prosperity and power.
It does. You kind of get caught up in the romance and grandeur of it all.
Fairly easy to do.
Yeah, but then you have this undercurrent of political maneuvering, right?
Right.
The rise and fall of all these powerful people.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, the rebellion that kind of brings the dynasty down.
Exactly. Yang Guifei's story is also kind of a warning about how fragile power can be.
Right.
And how personal relationships and political intrigue can get all tangled up.
Yeah, they can.
Her connection to the emperor obviously gave her a lot of privilege,
Definitely.
but it also made her a target when things started to fall apart.
Right.
The AnLushan rebellion, while not directly her fault,
Right.
it did expose the weaknesses of the Tang Dynasty
Oh,
and ultimately contributed to its decline.
so it's like her story reflects both the good and the bad of the Tang Dynasty.
Exactly. It's a complex legacy that goes beyond just a love story.
Yeah, it's more than just a love story.
And that's what makes history so interesting.
Mm.
It's not just about facts and dates.
Right.
We're exploring the real, messy lives of people.
Yeah, and how those lives intersect with bigger events.
Exactly. It reminds me of how we were talking about Yang Guifei's story being interpreted in different ways over time.
Yes, I was just thinking about that.
She's almost like a mythical figure.
Right, like a legend.
Each generation kind of projects their own values onto her story.
It's fascinating.
It is, and it shows how powerful her story is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story that goes beyond time, you know?
Right.
And it keeps captivating us with these themes of beauty, love, power, and tragedy.
Those are universal themes.
They are.
Whether she's seen as a manipulative figure, a victim, or something in between.
Right. It doesn't really matter.
It makes us think about history and what it means to be human.
That's a great way to put it.
I think that's a perfect way to end our deep dive.
Yeah, I agree.
It's been quite a journey through the Tang Dynasty. One that's made us question our assumptions, used our imaginations,
Absolutely.
and left us with a better understanding of this really enigmatic figure.
I hope it's inspired you to keep exploring and questioning the past.
I know I will. Thanks for taking us on this journey.
Of course, it's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep those curious minds engaged, and remember, history is more than just facts and dates. It's a story waiting to be uncovered, debated, and cherished.
Well said.